discover their murder victim, Elaine O'Hara, lived a secret, sexy double life of BDSM and chat rooms, they felt like they were onto something. Little did they know that that was only the tip of the iceberg, and things were about to get way weirder. So today's video is going to be another solved true crime case. Today is part 2 of the Elaine O'Hara case. If you didn't catch part 1, you kind of need to watch that one first, otherwise this one won't make any sense. I'll link it up here in the eye for you. You can go and watch that on another tab, then come right back here and we'll carry on together. But quickly, before we get into the rest of the case, I just want to thank our sponsor for making this video possible, Magellan TV. Magellan TV, you guys already know, is my favourite documentary streaming service ever. I'm always stalking their new releases because they put out between 15 and 20 hours of content every single week, so there's always something new on Magellan. And I found a documentary on there the other day called Witch Hunt in Salem. It's obviously all about the Salem witch trials, which is something that's fascinated me ever since I was a kid. The mass hysteria, the methods that they used to use to determine whether a woman was a witch or not, like, I can't believe that that kind of thing actually used to happen. If you're equally as interested in like witchy stuff as I am, then I really recommend Witch Hunt in Salem to you. It was so good. Magellan TV is completely ad-free, so there's never any interruptions while you're watching your documentaries. You can also watch on pretty much any device that you own, so what are you waiting for? And right now, when you buy one gift card for an annual membership, you'll get another one completely free. So that's 2 Christmas presents sorted, if you ask me. So if you want to grab that deal while you still can, make sure you're going through the link down below in the description of this video. Thanks again to Magellan TV for sponsoring this video. Now, before we get into it, I do just want to give the same content warnings as I gave in part 1. So if any of the following themes are things you don't think you can hear about right now, please do click out of the video and look after yourself. The themes of this video include domestic abuse, self-harm, suicide attempts, rape, manipulation and exploitation of a vulnerable person, as well as themes of BDSM and kink where it's not always consensual. So if any of that is something that you don't want to watch, like I said, please click out and look after yourself. That's the most important thing. I'm sure I'll see you again at some other point with a different video. Please do come back. I'll miss you if not. But anyway, let's just jump into part 2 of this case. I'm going to give you a very snappy summary and then we'll just flow straight into the rest of the case. Elaine O'Hara was a 36-year-old childcare worker living in Dublin, Ireland. In 2012, she went missing and then a year later, her bones were found laying in a forest. Police tried so hard to crack this case and find out who killed Elaine, but as they started investigating, they realised that Elaine O'Hara had quite a second life. Behind the scenes, Elaine O'Hara was a BDSM slave. She had violent sexual fantasies. She owned a lot of concerning material on her laptop. So could this second life have anything to do with why she turned up dead? Police continued searching through Elaine's laptop, and that was when they made a really lucky discovery, and that was that she'd actually synced her mobile phone to her MacBook, her iPhone and a MacBook, so all her iMessage texts came through on her laptop so they could sit and read all the conversations. They found that in March of 2011, Elaine got a text from a random number and she saved that number as David. So these are just a few of the texts between Elaine and David. David said, "I'm a sadist. I enjoy others' pain. You should help me inflict pain on you and help me with my fantasies." Elaine said, "Not into blood anymore. My urge to rape, stab, kill is huge. You have to help me control or satisfy it. I want to stick my knife in the flesh when I am sexually aroused. Blood turns me on. I'd like to stab a girl to death one day. I don't want you to stab me anymore. If you ever want to die, promise I can do it?" "Yes, I promise, sir. If the master is happy, I love making people happy." Over the coming days, police managed to piece together more and more information about this David. They spoke with one of Elaine's friends from one of her hospital stays in 2007. She had a really long hospital stay after one particular suicide attempt, and in the hospital, she made friends with a woman named Edna. Edna told the police that Elaine had said to her in 2007 that she was meeting up with a married man regularly for BDSM sex. And at one point, when Elaine was describing to Edna what she would do with this married man, she lifted her shirt, exposing her stomach, and that was when Edna saw 4 quite deep slashes in her stomach. Elaine seemed pretty proud of them though, saying that this married man would inflict pain on her during sex. He really liked knife play, and if it made him happy, then it made her happy. She told Edna that she very much enjoyed being a submissive. Even if she didn't enjoy the pain, she enjoyed the gratification that that pain brought her dominant. And that was what turned her on. And Edna didn't like the sound of this relationship at all. I mean, it was red flag after red flag, starting from the fact it was a married man and then ending in the fact that he was stabbing her. Edna told Elaine that she was playing a dangerous game with this man, but Elaine didn't want to hear it. She was happy. She was going to stay with this guy. After Elaine left the hospital that time, she and Edna actually lost contact and they never spoke again after that. But Edna had remembered this conversation for years because there was just something not right about it. She just knew that there was something not right about this relationship. And if you remember, Elaine was literally in hospital until the day that she disappeared. She was discharged the same day. So police thought it could be of use in this investigation to go and speak to all the hospital staff because, I don't know, maybe Elaine mentioned something to them that day and it didn't seem important at the time, but it might pertain to her murder now, who knows? So they went down there, they were interviewing all these different staff members, but they all just said that Elaine seemed really happy and excited. The only thing she was really talking about was the festival that she was due to work the day after. But then there was one particular nurse that told police she had a brief conversation with Elaine that day because she could tell Elaine was a little bit upset. She asked her what was going on, and Elaine said that there'd been a man that was constantly calling her and getting her to take part in bondage games. That was all Elaine mentioned to the nurse. But all these pieces are starting to come together now, aren't they? And police were hearing these same stories from people all over Elaine's life. Like her co-workers at the newsagents said that she would talk about seeing a married man from time to time. So this man that Elaine keeps telling everyone about, could that be David? And could David be Architect 72? The messages between David and Elaine get quite uncomfortable at certain points. It's very clear that they're both into quite different things and different intensities of things. David was always a lot more intense and overbearing in the text messages than Elaine was. And while I understand that was because of their like submissive and dominant roles, you can just kind of feel the vibe on these texts, if that makes sense. I'll be reading you a lot more throughout the video, so you'll definitely get the vibe more and more as we go through, but it definitely feels as though Elaine she feels like she kind of doesn't have a choice with the submissiveness. In these texts, David would ask Elaine if they could introduce knife play into the bedroom. He would say that he wanted to stab her and he wanted to see her blood. It would really turn him on to see that. And Elaine responded to those texts at the time saying like, oh no, I don't really want to use knives. I'm not into blood stuff anymore. But then as weeks went by and these texts continue, it becomes very clear that the knife play was introduced into the bedroom in real life, and then they're talking about it on text. So that was a boundary that Elaine very clearly demonstrated, saying, no, I do not want to do that, but it ends up happening anyway. And this is a trend. It wasn't just this one instance. She always says no to particular things, and they end up happening anyway. David always gets his way anyway. David would constantly manipulate Elaine. He knew that she was a very lonely, depressed, vulnerable person that was just looking for some companionship, for some comfort, for a friend. And he would use all of her desperate desires against her. So she would share with him the fact that she really wants to be a mother one day. She really wanted a child. Like I said, she had that maternal instinct in her. And so David would reply to those texts and promise her that he would give her a baby one day, like promise to impregnate her, as long as she helped him satisfy his cravings first. Those cravings being murder. He wanted to commit murder, and he wanted Elaine to help him. David proposed a plan to Elaine about how they were going to do this, about how they were going to satisfy each other's craving. His craving for murder, her wanting a baby. He told Elaine that they were going to book a house viewing for a very remote house in the middle of nowhere, and they were going to book it under fake names, using a fake number, and then when they turned up, there was probably only going to be one estate agent there to show them around the house, and it was probably going to be a woman. I don't know how he came to that conclusion, but he did. He thought there was going to be one woman that turned up at the house, and she would be the chosen victim. He said that he would catch her off guard, throw a hood over her head, and then tie her up, gag her. Then he would torture her, do all these different things to her that he'd always dreamed of doing, and then finally he would end it by slashing her throat and killing her. And David said that once he'd murdered this woman and satisfied his craving, he would then take Elaine back to her apartment and impregnate her. And then both the ends of the deal would be complete. This plan was never put into action, thank God, but it does just go to show kind of the lengths that this man would go to manipulate Elaine. He's literally saying, commit murder with me and I'll give you a baby. He would also sprinkle in lots of like smaller forms of manipulation throughout the day. So like he would try and wear down her self-esteem. He would call her old, fat, ugly, worthless. He would constantly like remind her of her own suicide attempts and kind of use that against her. Whoever David was, sick man. And when he would use her mental illness against her, he would say things like, oh, if you just let me stab you, I'd be doing you a favor. Because his ultimate goal, it seemed, was to commit murder, the murder of a woman. And I really don't think David minded if that woman had to be Elaine. In fact, he would even encourage that Elaine would be his victim. He would like hint to the fact that like, if she's suicidal anyway, then why not just let him get it over and done for her? I have an example of that in some text here where David said, I can put you to sleep. Stop. I know you want it. 30 seconds to slip into oblivion. I have everything ready if it all becomes too much. Just think, all your worries are gone. I can fit you in Thursday. Right now, I'm not that bad. You can literally see in these texts the manipulation that is happening. Elaine is trying to assert her boundaries and say, no, that's not what I want. And he's like, yeah, you do. Police really felt like they were onto something with David and all of these texts. And so the next thing they tried to do was to figure out who David was, trace this phone number back and get some identification. They found that this phone number belonged to a Nokia brick phone that was bought in 2011. And it was registered to a man named Graham Dwyer, living in Tipperary. And I'm really sorry if I pronounced that name really badly, but I googled it so many times and there's no one else in the world called Garoon. I tried my best. I'll feel really bad now if that's like, imagine if that's like a really popular Irish name and I've just offended so many people. I'm so sorry to all the Garoons. But anyway, police had a name, Graham Dwyer. And so they started trying to look up this man to see if, you know, they could get in touch with him, find out what's going on here. But as they put this name in the database, they searched it up and realised that that person doesn't exist. There is no record of a Graham Dwyer in Tipperary or living in Ireland at all. There's no record of a Graham. It seemed that this Nokia phone had been bought under a fake name, under a fake identity. So whoever police were onto here was always one step ahead of them. Police knew that they would have to try a different tactic if they wanted to get some leads in this case. So they marched down to Elaine O'Hara's apartment building where she used to live, and they asked the security staff for 6 months worth of CCTV footage from the outside of her building because they wanted to see who Elaine was in contact with, like who she was meeting up with regularly. In total, they combed through 5,300 hours of CCTV footage from this house, hoping to try and find, well, I don't know, this mystery man, this David Garoon. Architect 72, whatever we're calling him in this video, I don't know. After looking through all of this footage, police identified one particular man that had been to Elaine O'Hara's apartment 12 times before her disappearance. And it seemed like every single time this particular man would go past one of the cameras in the building, he would hide his face. Why is that? Very, very suspicious. But on one occasion, thank God, he forgot to hide his face because on this particular occasion, he was walking inside the building with Elaine. So they were just having a conversation, he was distracted, he walked past a camera and forgot to hide his face. But also at the same time, the footage wasn't good enough to like identify him from this footage, but it was good to have in case they got a suspect in the future, they'd be able to compare the suspect to the footage, you know? And it was as they were watching this CCTV footage that one police officer pointed something out about this man. The rucksack that he was carrying. That rucksack was the same rucksack that they'd found in the reservoir when they'd recovered all of those items, Elaine's keys, you know. Police are getting more and more confirmation by the day that they're on the right track, that they're onto the right guy, but they're still actually not getting any closer to catching him. The bag had no identification in it at all. There was no like ID or bank card in it or anything, so what they're gonna do? Don't lead anywhere. So what did they do? Police decided to go back to those thousands and thousands and thousands of text messages between David and Elaine and hope that they can maybe decipher some clues about who David really is, like in his real life. On March 30th, 2011, Elaine texts David saying, "You still on? Wife not in labour or anything? So far so good. Got fake knives." And then the following day, Elaine texted him again saying, "I take it you're now a daddy again." Yes, beautiful baby girl. So David was now a father of a 2-year-old daughter, and he must have at least one other child as well, since Elaine said you're a daddy again, meaning that he already is one. So he's got multiple children, a 2-year-old daughter. We know that he's married. Quickly, we're piecing together a lot of elements of this man's life. So they keep looking for clues, and then they come across this one particular conversation where Elaine had texted David asking him how his weekend had gone. David replied, "Terrible, 15% pay cut and came 5th in flying." Now the flying bit is what piqued police's interest because what? What does that mean? What does 5th in flying mean? Police took this and ran with it. They were looking into pilots, flying competitions, fly fishing competitions. They were trying to find someone that likes to fly. But they couldn't find any events that had taken place around the time that these texts were sent, so they couldn't figure out what he was talking about, like what he was referring to there. And then one police officer piped up in this room and he said, "Hang on a minute guys, I think I've got this." He said that a couple of years ago, he'd been out on a walk in the Dublin mountains when he'd looked above him and saw all these like model aeroplanes flying around in the air. At the time, he had no idea what was going on. He went home, Googled it, found out it was a model aircraft flying competition. And so he said to the rest of the police team, he was like, what if that's what it was? What if he did like model aircraft flying? So they went back to the laptops, they Googled model aircraft flying competition on this particular date, May 22nd, and believe it or not, one popped up. There was a model aircraft flying competition on the same day that David had sent those texts. So this had to have been the competition that he was in. So police got in touch with the people that held the event. They spoke to the events manager and they asked if they could have a big list of all of the participants, like the leaderboard, essentially. The events manager told them that they would have it over to the police by the end of the day, and they were so excited because they felt like this was finally it. When they looked at this piece of paper and they saw who was in 5th place, that name should be their killer. So they got this piece of paper in, they looked at it, and in 5th place in this model aircraft flying competition was a man named Graham Dwyer. So if police had got everything right up until this point, that meant that Graham Dwyer was their killer. So police looked his name up on the database and they found that not long before this, he'd actually reported his bike as being stolen. He thought it had been stolen from his architecture firm. Yes, you heard that right. Graham Dwyer, aka David, aka Garoon, aka Architect 72, was an architect. After some digging, police found that Graham Dwyer had a wife named Gemma who had had a baby girl 2 years prior to this, just like those texts said. And it was also confirmed after they called this architecture firm that Graham Dwyer had been given a 15% pay cut around that same time. But who was Graham Dwyer? or David, or Garoon, or Architect 72. Let's talk about this man a little bit more, shall we? Graham Dwyer was born on September 13th, 1972, and he grew up in County Cork. He was 40 years old at the time of this case, I believe. Growing up, Graham was very well liked in school. He had a lot of friends. He was quite hardworking. He had this dream ever since he was a child that he wanted to become an architect one day. And it looks like he achieved that dream. He eventually went on to get a degree in architecture in university, and it was while he was there that he met his first ever serious girlfriend named Emma McShay. A few months into their relationship, Emma actually fell pregnant, and she said that from that moment on, Graham completely switched. He was like a completely different person. He was suddenly very abusive, emotionally abusive, manipulative, controlling, mean. Emma stayed with him for the next 9 months, but then as soon as she had her baby, she had a beautiful baby boy, she took that child and she ran and went and lived with her parents and got as far away from Graham Dwyer as she possibly could. So now Graham was single again and he was looking for another gal, and that was when he noticed another architecture student that caught his eye, Gemma, the woman that would later become his wife, the person that he would have 2 children with. When Graham left university, he went on to become a very successful and well-respected architect. He was a director in the firm that he worked at, and I think he earned a decent amount of money, to be fair. And he would spend this money on a lot of different flash things. He was very much into fast cars. He bought himself a Porsche, he bought himself an Audi, and of course he was really into his model aircraft flying. Every single night, every single weekday that he would get home from work, he would just go into his garage and like work on these model aircrafts, and then on the weekends he would go out and fly them at the park and stuff. And this was the man that police believed murdered Elaine O'Hara. And so they set about gathering more evidence against him. They didn't want to call him in for an interview or anything because they didn't want to give anything away just yet. And so instead, they put him on 24-hour surveillance. They had a police officer following him around at all times. But Graham Dwyer's life was pretty boring. Like, I'm not gonna lie, it was very uneventful. He just went to and from work every day and then like spent the evenings chilling with his family. There was really not much for police to note when they were watching him. I mean, by now it had been way over a year since Elaine was murdered. So even if Graham Dwyer was the killer, would he still be doing suspicious things a year later for police to watch? I don't know. I don't think so. Police quickly realised that he probably wasn't gonna do anything that was worth watching anytime soon, and so they went back to the drawing board and they were like, right, what can we do now? Where can we look for another lead? And that was when they remembered the Nokia phone that they'd fished out of the reservoir. They somehow managed to get this phone up and running again, which says a lot about Nokias, doesn't it? The fact that this phone has been in a reservoir for a year and you can still make it work? Petition for us all to go back to Nokias. So they set up this phone and they found that it only had one contact saved, and it had only ever texted or communicated with this one contact. And it was saved as MSTR, Mr. Obviously it's supposed to say master, but without the vowels, so it's Mr. But this number was a completely different number to the David number that Elaine had been texting, or the Garoon number. So who is this now? Who is Master? She's got Master, she's got David. So police did their little tracky tracy thing and they managed to find out that this Nokia phone had been bought at the same time as another Nokia phone. So whoever had purchased it bought 2 of the exact same phone at the exact same time in November of 2011. And this pretty much told police everything they needed to know, that one person had bought both Nokia phones at the same time. It seemed that these were probably burner phones. These phones look to have been set up so that both people can only contact each other and no one will know that they're talking or what they're talking about. So these 2 phones are known as the master phone and the slave phone. One of them is Mr. and one of them is Slv. I don't know why they saved it like that. Why not just put the vowels in, because I can literally tell what you're trying to say with Mr. and Slv. But anyway, they're the master phone and the slave phone, and between December of 2011 and August of 2012, so that's 8 months, these phones were in constant contact, and there was over 1,000 messages between the 2 of them, between these 2 burner phones. Now this got police thinking, because it seems there's a lot of Nokia phones in this case. This got police thinking that, remember that CCTV footage on the day that Elaine went missing, when she leaves her apartment for the very last time, she's holding a phone, but police could tell it wasn't her iPhone. Does that mean it was the other Nokia phone? Perhaps the slave phone? Police came up with a theory that maybe Elaine O'Hara was the slave phone because she was the slave, and Graham Dwyer was the master phone. But they had to prove this theory. They couldn't just wave around this theory like it was nothing. So to do this, they had a look at the mobile phone masts. You know, every time you send a text or make a call or something, your phone will ping off the closest mobile phone mast to you at that time. So by tracing which mobile phone masts each phone pinged off at different times, they can figure out locations and stuff. So this specialist sat down with the master phone and all of its records, and they started going through it. And they noticed on one particular day, the phone pinged off of a telephone mast in Galway, and then later that same night, it pinged off another mast all the way in Dublin, which is at the complete other side of the country. At first, they were a little bit confused until they worked out that if you take a particular motorway route, you can actually get from Galway all the way to Dublin in that time frame that these two masts were pinged. And so they theorised that whoever was on this phone had started in Galway and then driven on the motorway all the way to Dublin, which gave them an idea. If they were to look at the CCTV of that motorway at the exact same time that that car should be coming through, then surely they've got their guy. So they pull up the cameras, and there they find a blue Audi TT registered to Graham Dwyer, driving through that exact area at that exact time. They also looked up Graham's work phone locations. I don't know how they had access to his work phone, but they did. And they looked up the locations of that on the same day, and it turned out that that phone had also pinged in Galway and then in Dublin. So it was in the exact same place as the burner phone. So Graham must have been in possession of both phones. That was his burner phone. Detectives just had to find that master phone now. They had the slave phone, but they didn't actually have the master phone. All of this work that they were doing was through the network. Like, obviously police have ways of getting information from mobile phone networks and stuff, but they could really do with having this actual phone. And they knew exactly where it was as well. They knew it had to be in the reservoir. That same reservoir that they'd searched like 500 times so far. It was such a pain in the ass, was this reservoir. But they knew that they had to search it again. They had to. They knew this phone had to be in there. So again, cordoned off the area, sent the diving team in, and thank God they actually found it. And this master phone was the exact same as the slave phone in the way that they only had each other's numbers saved as master and slave, or Mr. and Sleuth. And the only communication from both of the phones had been to the other one. But now police had the full text records from both burner phones. So this was massive. They started piecing together the days running up to Elaine O'Hara's murder. On the 21st of August, so the day before Elaine went missing, Master sends the first text. He said, "If anything happened to you, who knows about me? I told no one about you. Good, let's keep it that way. You will be well bound and gagged, tied to a tree deep in the forest. I have a spot picked out. I'm not leaving my apartment. You will have to drag me out. You will do what you are fucking told. I want outdoor play, or I'll double punish you and hang you." And then on August 22nd, the day that Elaine disappeared, Master texts first again. He said, "I found a really, really remote place. No one will find us. Sir, do I have to be naked? It's very deep in the forest, and yes, you do. I don't want blood all over your clothes. Now I'm terrified. This place, although a pain in the arse at times, is safe because I know what's coming and I don't want to leave. Do not fear death. I'm just so scared. Do you know, sir, that I'm scared of you? You have this hold over me that terrifies me. You must be punished for trying to kill yourself without me and for being unavailable for so long." Just to interject, I'm pretty sure her being unavailable for so long is a reference to her spending time in hospital after another suicide attempt, that she was unavailable because she was in hospital. That's just sick and twisted, but okay. So anyway, the master says that she should be punished. Slave says, "Yes, sir, I know. Master needs to punish slave. I'm going to get blood on my knife for this. A lot of blood, and then we can move on. Please don't mention kill for a while until I settle back to life. Please, sir. And now, this is where things start to get incriminating, shall we say? But tonight's punishment will be like me pretending to do someone for real, okay? I want you to park at Shanganar Cemetery at 5:30. Leave your iPhone at home. Just bring slave phone and keys. You will get further instructions there. No offence, sir, but do we have to do it in the rain? It's cold. Empty yourself and become nothing. You are property and a piece of slave meat. Your only job is to serve. Cross bridge, head for opposite end of the park near steps to the sea. Yes, steps here. And then the last text that was ever sent between these two burner phones came from the master phone. He texted her saying, go down to the shore and wait. After this, both the phones were turned off and there is no more communication. Police firmly believe that within an hour of that last text being sent, Graham Dwyer had finally fulfilled his fantasy of stabbing a woman to death whilst having sex with her. And that woman was unfortunately Elaine O'Hara. Police have estimated that the murder itself took place just after 6 p.m. and then from Graham Dwyer's phone records, they can see that he was back home with his wife and kids by 9 p.m. Not even 3 hours after. And finally now, police felt they had enough evidence against Graham Dwyer to go and arrest him for the murder of Elaine O'Hara in October of 2013, which was a year and 2 months after the murder. He was actually arrested in his home, I think in front of his wife and kids. I know his wife was for sure there, and Gemma was just absolutely distraught over this whole thing. She couldn't believe that the man that she thought she loved for decades was capable of such horrific things deep down. Later that day, a whole police team went down to Graham Dwyer's office where he worked at the architectural firm, and they were taking everything like hard drives, computers, memory sticks, everything that Graham had in his office. And that was when his co-workers found out about his arrest as well, and they were all gobsmacked. It seemed that everyone that was close to Graham Dwyer could not believe that he'd done something so heinous, even though there was so much evidence to prove it. They all just thought he wasn't that kind of person, which I suppose goes to show you never really know the people around you. So anyway, Graham Dwyer is now taken back to the police station and they begin his interrogations, starting out with basic questions like, do you know who Elaine O'Hara is? Have you ever met Elaine O'Hara? Graham said that he actually didn't know Elaine, and he'd never met her before. He'd only heard of her murder case on the news. Anyway, the interview continued on, and investigators realised as they were progressing through these questions that Graham Dwyer would often try and pull the topic of conversation back to himself. They noticed that he would just light up whenever he was talking about himself. And he told the police everything about himself, that he flies model aircrafts, that he was into sports cars. Every single time these officers had to try and get him back on the right track of conversation. So the next thing they did was they confronted Graham Dwyer with all the CCTV evidence that they had of him going into Elaine's apartment like 12 times in the run-up to her disappearance. That obviously proves that he knows her. And as he's watching all of these clips, he's saying, nope, that's not me, nope, that's not me. Every single one, not him. But then they showed those same clips to his ex-wife Gemma and his son, and they both said, no, yeah, that's definitely Graham. Throughout this interview, Graham Dwyer seemed more offended whenever police would accuse him of cheating on his wife with Elaine than he would when they accused him of murdering Elaine. He was more offended by being a cheater than he was a murderer. During his interview, Graham said, I will not air my dirty laundry here if it's going beyond here. I think I know what's coming next, and I don't want my wife hurt. I am terrified of my laundry being aired, but at the same time, I didn't kill anybody. I want to protect Gemma. Graham Dwyer just still wasn't budging. He was maintaining his innocence, and so police knew that now it was time to pull out the big guns, the master and slave texts. So they read them all out to him, presented him with, all the printouts and stuff, and he's looking at them and he's just denying everything. He's denying owning those phones, knowing anything about those texts. And at this point, police were just a bit sick of him. Like, he was denying everything when it was so obvious that it was him. So at this point, police were like, fine, okay, you say the texts aren't yours, but little did Graham Dwyer know that they'd actually found over 1,000 texts coming from Graham Dwyer's personal mobile phone to Elaine O'Hara's personal mobile phone. What is the point in ever getting a burner phone if you're gonna contact each other on your personal phones anyway? So there's a record of you two being close anyway. Anyway, and let's just remind ourselves what Graham said at the start of this interview, that he didn't know Elaine O'Hara, he'd never met her, he only knew of her because of the murder case. Is that so? Is that so? Certainly doesn't look that way from the text messages. As he was in police custody, Graham Dwyer was asked to do a DNA sample so that it could be tested against the semen sample that was found on Elaine's bed. And would you have guessed it? It's a match. Graham then admitted to the police that he had had a sexual relationship with Elaine O'Hara at some point over the years. He told police that he only lied to them in the beginning of this interview, saying he didn't know Elaine O'Hara, only knew her because of the murder case. He was doing that to protect his wife because he didn't want his wife to find out that he'd been cheating on her. So anyway, day one of interrogations was over, and the next morning they come back and they're starting fresh. Police decide to go straight back in with the CCTV footage of Graham going into Elaine O'Hara's apartment like 12 times in the run-up to her murder. Because obviously Graham's story is changing fast at the moment. Every single thing that police are slipping him up on, he's changing his story. So they wondered what might change here. So he's watching this footage and he's still denying being the man in it. And then they show him that one clip where he shows his face. And Graham's watching it and he still has the nerve to deny that that's him when his face is right there in the video. But then he does say something interesting about the rucksack that he was carrying in the CCTV footage. He said, "I know who owns the bag. Elaine owns the bag. She used to keep BDSM gear in it. She used to meet men for BDSM things." That's interesting because that certainly sounds a lot like what you do. After a few more hours of interrogation and confrontation, Graham Dwyer eventually admits that yes, he is the man on that CCTV footage. And then he started to admit some other stuff too. He told police that he first met Elaine O'Hara on a fetish website named alt.com, although he insisted that he's not a big part of the BDSM scene. In fact, he was looking very embarrassed as he was talking about this to the police, and he actually said, "I am mortified about this." He talked more about Elaine, saying the ultimate thing with Elaine was she wanted to be kept all day in a cage with a bowl of water. She was scarred from head to toe. So he's essentially saying that her fetish of choice was to be kept in a cage like a dog with a bowl of water. So the detectives then confronted Graham Dwyer with the texts from the morning of Elaine's murder between those two burner phones, talking about tonight's punishment and how his knife is going to be covered in blood. And Graham got really defensive at this. Obviously, he's still saying he's got nothing to do with those phones, and so he snapped back at the officer saying, "That's awful. I'm not into stabbing. Why would you say that?" So the detective then told Graham that they'd spoken with his ex-girlfriend Emma, the mother of his first child from university, and that Emma had told them all about how he had this knife fantasy and he used to hold a knife to her throat while they had sex. He would always tell Emma that he wanted to stab women while he had sex with them and stuff. She knew all this stuff about him. She told the police. So police knew that stuff about him. But then Graham told them not to believe anything that Emma says because there's a lot of hatred there. So he's insinuating that she's still holding like some kind of grudge against him over the relationship, and so she's lying about this. Finally, on October 18th, 2013, this pile of evidence that just kept mounting against Graham Dwyer finally crushed him, and he was charged with the murder of Elaine O'Hara. As he awaited his trial, Graham actually tried to get released on bail 3 times, and one of these is actually really quite funny. Are you ready for this? In his cell, Graham sat and sketched out on a piece of paper a map. And he said that this was a map of the basement room of his office at his architectural firm. He marked on a spot on this map for the police to go and look. And he gave this treasure map to his solicitor and asked his solicitor to hand it on to the police on his behalf. So as soon as police received this treasure map, they went down to his office, went to the basement room, and sure enough, in that exact place, they found 3 massive knives But why had Graham led them to these knives without being provoked? Well, I think he believed that he could get let out on bail if he just showed some cooperation with the police and the investigation. As if leading them to more evidence is going to help you get out of jail. Where's the logic? Instead, police just seized these knives and ultimately ended up using them as evidence against him, which is just funny. So the trial began in January of 2015, and the judge actually warned all the jurors as they were being selected that if they were squeamish, then they probably shouldn't go for this one because it was going to be a big one. The trial lasted 9 weeks in total, and they had to present 15 months worth of investigation in 9 weeks. There were 488 interviews to go through, 388 statements, 5,300 hours of CCTV, and over 2,500 text messages. That is one hell of a trial. The biggest trial I've ever heard. And this trial completely gripped the nation for those 9 weeks. Like, Ireland was invested in this case. It's all everyone was talking about. Like, members of the public were trying to get in the courtroom every single day. People were keeping up with it on the news. So anyway, the trial begins, but obviously because we actually still don't know Elaine O'Hara's cause of death, it was going to be quite hard to present this case as the prosecutor. He was just going to have to go on circumstantial evidence like text messages, CCTV footage. He told the jury that on the day of the murder, Elaine O'Hara had just been discharged from the psychiatric hospital, and Graham Dwyer knew that full well. He knew how vulnerable she was, especially on this day of all days, and he took advantage of that. Because he had this ultimate sexual fantasy where he wanted to stab a woman to death as he had sex with her. And he was looking for someone to go through with that plan with. And he probably chose Elaine O'Hara as his victim because he thought she would be an easy kill. I mean, she was very depressed, she was suicidal, she attempted suicide a lot of times by herself. He probably thought that he could propose this plan, that he wants to kill her, he wants to stab a woman while having sex with her, and he thought that she might just accept because she wants to die anyway. But what he didn't anticipate was Elaine having so much courage and strength to keep going even when times were really, really hard for her. She knew deep down that she didn't want to die. She wanted to keep going and get better and live a full life again. And so that was why she was never open to him killing her. Every time he suggested it, she didn't want to. But eventually, Graham Dwyer grew frustrated and just did it anyway. He just murdered Elaine O'Hara for his own sexual gratification, to fulfill this fantasy. At one point during the trial, Graham's ex-wife Gemma got up to give evidence against him, and she was so anxious, bless her. She was like visibly shaking in the courtroom. They actually put a barrier of like 1 or 2 officers between her and Graham. They weren't anywhere close, but like so that they couldn't see each other, because seeing him was making her so anxious and she didn't want him to see her. So Gemma told the court that while Graham Dwyer had been in his holding cell, while he'd been waiting for his trial, he'd actually sent her a letter. And she stood up in the court and she read this letter. I've got a couple of quotes from it here. He kept referring to Elaine O'Hara throughout this letter as that awful woman. And he went on to say, "I do know her, yes, I was helping her, and I wasn't totally honest with you." So that's basically him trying to explain this situation to his wife, how he can even attempt to explain why he was murdering people. I don't know. And then the prosecution presented Gemma with a shovel. And they asked her if she recognised it. And she said, "Actually, I do. That is my shovel. I lost that shovel years ago." It turns out that the police had recovered that shovel not far from where Elaine O'Hara's remains had been found in the forest. So it seems that Graham Dwyer had used that shovel when attempting to dispose of her body and just left it there. And then in quite a shocking turn of events, the prosecution then called up another witness to give evidence against Graham Dwyer. But this witness would actually have to attend the trial via a video link, because she was in America. This woman's name was Dyer, and she told the court that she knew Graham Dwyer because she'd met him some years ago on a fetish website, and they'd spoken quite a lot over the years. She said that Graham had always had fantasies about raping women and murdering women, stabbing women, blood. She said that he would even send him like pictures of dead women and strangled women. And it turned out that Graham actually had a lot of similar conversations with Darcy Day, especially about like ending her life, as he'd had with Elaine O'Hara. He'd proposed him killing both women. Darcy herself was very much depressed and suicidal, and Graham Dwyer knew that. He sought out these kind of women specifically. He was targeting vulnerable women. And Darcy said that one day Graham actually sent her a diagram of all the arteries in the human neck, and he told her that he was studying so that he wouldn't miss the crucial arteries when he slit her throat. Darcy said that Graham had actually been quite open about his relationship with Elaine to her, like he'd told Darcy all about it. She said, "I knew they had an intimate relationship, and he told me that she was similar to me and that she was suicidal. He said he used to cut her in the stomach area and stuff." But where Elaine wasn't so willing to go through with Graham's plan of murdering her, Darcy Day was a lot more open to the idea. Darcy was struggling really, really bad. And she said that it actually got to the point where she and Graham made plans for him to come over to the United States, murder her, and then dispose of her body. I honestly think if there hadn't been a geographical barrier there, like if Graham and Darcy had have lived close by, then I think he probably would have killed her. Like, they would have gone through with this plan, because Darcy seemed like she was very open to it at the time, at least. On the 33rd day of this trial, the judge actually started the morning by giving a stark warning to everyone in the courtroom that there was about to be some very graphic material shown. And very rarely in Irish criminal cases do the public actually get, like, kicked out of a courtroom. But in this particular case, the judge just didn't want anyone that didn't have to see it to see it, because it was just so traumatizing. He didn't want to subject the general public to that. The only people that were allowed to remain in the courtroom were the jury, the press, and obviously like legal teams and everyone that was actually involved in the case. So all of these graphic photos and videos that were shown in the court all came from Graham's different electronics, his laptop, phone, memory sticks. They found numerous different snuff films where women were raped, murdered, tortured, all that kind of stuff. They also found a document titled Killing Darcy, which was created in 2011, and that is exactly what you think it is. It was his plan of how he was going to murder Darcy Day. There was also a folder titled EH, and this contained a lot of videos of Graham Dwyer and Elaine O'Hara having sex. In some of these videos, Graham actually got out a penknife and starts stabbing Elaine in her sides. And oh my god, the jury said that the noises Elaine was making were just haunting. She was in so much pain. There was another video that showed Elaine with duct tape over her mouth, and again, she's screaming in pain as he's stabbing her. And then when he finishes, he says, "Now that wasn't bad, was it?" At the end of this trial, the jury took 8 hours in total to deliberate their verdict, and Graham Dwyer was actually very confident for some reason that he wouldn't be found guilty. In fact, he'd actually said to one of the prison guards earlier that morning that when he was found not guilty, he was going to treat himself to a steak meal and a bottle of wine. But unfortunately, Graham Dwyer would have to kiss goodbye to that romantic meal for one, because he was found guilty of the murder of Elaine O'Hara. And for that, he was sentenced to life in prison. At the sentencing, Elaine's friends and family gave an impact statement, and I found this quote particularly hard-hitting. They said, "We will probably never know what happened on Wednesday the 22nd of August 2012, but there are questions that trouble us. When did Elaine realise that this was not a game anymore? When did she realise that the intention was to kill her for real?" So Graham Dwyer is actually still in prison right now, and he supposedly spends a lot of the time in his cell either playing his guitar or doing yoga. But this case doesn't stop there, because Graham Dwyer is still a massive pain in the arse, even locked away in prison. He's actually trying to appeal the decision that was made and get a retrial. And I'm gonna try and explain how he's doing this, but I myself don't really understand it that well. You guys know I'm naff with stuff like this. My knowledge literally does not go beyond like murder and crystals. I don't know anything about the law. I don't know all these technical terms. So maybe I won't describe it that well. Maybe you'll have to Google it if you want to know this part of the case. Basically, the way that police like tracked his phone and stuff using all the masts and stuff like that, the way that they did that, it was fine to do at the time, but a ruling has been made since then that would now make that invalid. So now Graham Dwyer is trying to take this back to court so that it can be found invalid, and then without that piece of evidence against him, he might not be found guilty of the murder if he was trialed a second time without that piece of evidence. That's the way I understood it, at least. And I'm sorry if I'm wrong, because I don't understand a lot of things, so that's already a red flag. It's all very technical, but basically it's reached the Supreme Court by now, and we should have a final decision probably around Christmas time this year. Christmas 2021. This case has been described as very nearly the perfect murder, and I have to agree, Graham Dwyer had the police stumped with every new lead. He was a smart man, but clearly not smart enough. Thanks again to Magellan TV for sponsoring this video. Remember, when you buy one gift card for an annual membership, you'll get another completely free. All you have to do is go through my link. It's down below in the description. Huge thank you to all of my channel members for helping me decide the cases that I cover, especially my tier 2 members whose names are all on screen right now. If you want to become a channel member, you can just click the join button on a desktop, or there'll be a link in the description of this video. But yeah, thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed, please leave a thumbs up. That would really help me out. If you want to subscribe, you can click this link right here. If you want to subscribe to my second channel, the link is right here. Or if you want to watch another true crime video, there'll be a playlist on screen right now. Bye!